Okay, so what the Spanish what they decide to do is they appoint the governor of Coahuila, a guy named Alonso de Leon. And he's part of this wilderness manhunt where the Spanish are trying to hunt down La Salle and Fort San Luis. And so, as I said, accidentally, because La, La Salle's uh, his landing in Texas was an accident. The Spanish get provoked. Now they have a new neighbor, which they hadn't had before, which is the French in Louisiana. And so this guy De Leon, he starts searching for La Salle. And what happens is the Spanish begin mapping Texas. They there some Spanish Navy ships from what's now Mexico start mapping the Gulf Coast. So LaSalle provokes the Spanish into start paying attention to Texas. Um, Basically, the Spanish find out eventually that the La Salle expedition is a disaster. Fort San Luis has been destroyed. Most of the people involved in it are dead. There are some captives, but most have been killed. La Salle himself has been killed. Interestingly, about three of the folks that had went gone north with LaSalle to try to reconnect with the French around the Mississippi, around the Missouri area. They actually did make it all the way back there, shows real fortitude. And that's how we know what happened with LaSalle, because some of the small party that started north with him uh, did manage to make it back into French territory. I honestly don't know what happened to them. I mean, LaSalle was murdered. Maybe they blamed somebody else for the murder. I don't know. But anyway, let's go back to the Spanish. And so after they realize, okay, LaSalle's not a threat anymore, the Spanish decide, okay, we need to settle somewhere in Texas and we need to keep an eye on the French in Louisiana. And it just so happened that the Caddoan people were on the border area between Spanish Texas and French Louisiana. And the Caddoan people were, because they were sedentary, because they were basically agriculture, although they did hunt as well, they were the best candidates for Christianization. And so it just kind of worked out that way. So the Spanish government decides that it has to settle what's now East Texas. And I've got a map up here. It's the map of Texas I posted on Canvas. The border wasn't airtight between, no one really knew where Louisiana began or ended and Texas began and vice versa. So it's a little fuzzy where the border is between Spanish Texas and French Louisiana. But the Spanish decide that they need to settle this area. So De Leon comes up with a Franciscan priest by the name of Father Hidalgo, and the Franciscans were very eager to Christianize the Caddoan people because basically that was their job. And they come up into the Caddoan area to begin to settle and establish missions and presidios in this area. So this is the first attempt by the Spanish to really settle Texas. So let me go ahead and just say one thing: it fails. The 1690s attempt post LaSalle is an utter failure. So I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but it is the first attempt of the Spanish to try to settle. Now they will begin settle Texas within 2 decades, but this first attempt's a failure. And here's what happens. So the Spaniards send an expedition into the Caddoan country. And the Spaniards, the way they traveled, they were quite religious. They always had an image of the Virgin at the front of their line to show their Roman Catholicism, the Virgin Mary. And as they march into the Caddoan country, they're very lucky because it was the Caddoan tradition when it met with groups that it didn't know that the Caddoans would send out women to show their peaceful intent, and they expected the people that were coming into their territory to do the same thing, to send women forward. And this was a way of showing everybody that things were going to be peaceful, right? So what the Cadoan, how they interpreted the picture of the Virgin Mary, the image of the Virgin Mary that the Spanish were carrying, they interpreted it as okay, well, this is how these people are indicating that they're coming peacefully, because they have a woman at the front of their line. It's not a flesh and blood woman, it's an image of a woman, but nonetheless, it's a female. So the Cadoan, they I wouldn't say they welcome the Spanish, but they tolerate the Spanish. They allow the Spanish to begin building some very, very rudimentary missions uh, in their territory in what's now East Texas. But things go sour really, really quickly between the Spanish and the Cadoan. For one thing, the Spanish they completely misinterpret some of the Cadoan practices. So, for instance, some Cadoan women would go topless, especially younger women. There was nothing erotic about it in any way, shape, or form. It was just kind of a different society. Um, and so, what the Spanish, they believed wrongly that these were invitations for sexual activity, which they were absolutely not. So, what you have is sexual assaults on the part of the Spanish against young Cadoan women. Um, the Spanish try to impose the Catholic religion on the Cadoans. The Cadoans, this is not what they'd signed up for. They had really no desire to become Roman Catholic, at least at this point. So the Spanish alienate the Cadoan in that way as well. So very quickly, the Cadoan people sour on the Spanish, very, very quickly. And ultimately, they drive the Spanish out. There's also the Spanish don't do a very good job with these settlements. They're not able to grow enough food to feed themselves. There's a drought. So basically, the first Spanish settlements, for various reasons, are a complete disaster in East Texas, and the Spanish retreat back across the Rio Grande. And the Cadoan are so intent on getting the Spanish out of their territory that Cadoan warriors follow the Spanish all the way to what is now Austin, to the Colorado River. They just want to make sure that the Spanish are gone. They've had it. They're washing their hands of the Spanish, at least at this point. So the Spanish have to retreat all the way back into the interior of Mexico, and so this first encounter between the Cadoan and the Spanish is a disaster. Now, a couple of interesting points. The word Tejas is a Spanish word. It's a bastardization of a Cadoan word, which meant ally or friend. And so that's how we get the word Texas. It's the Spanish interpretation of a Cadoan word. Like I say, that means ally or friend. So that's where the word Texas comes from. And also, and I may talk about this in a later podcast, what the Spanish do after they are forced to retreat back into Mexico, they decide that they need a mission closer to East Texas. And so what you have is the creation, again, by Father Hidalgo, the very stalwart priest who wants to Christianize the Cadoan. He creates San Juan Bautista. And San Juan Bautista today it's in Mexico. It's on the south side of the Rio Grande. It's near Eagle Pass. And San Juan Bautista, although it's in Mexico, it during the Spanish period, today's Mexico, remember the Rio Grande wasn't a border then. San Juan Bautista, it becomes the mother mission to Texas. It becomes the gateway into Texas for Spaniards moving into Texas. So, arguably, the most important Texas mission during the Spanish period was not in what we call Texas today, but it was just south of the Rio Grande. It was called San Juan Bautista. You'll be tested on that. And it was the gateway mission. It was where people would come and they would get supplies. They could get organized. There's the Rio Grande has some very shallow crossings there. That's why it was created there. It wasn't just random that it was created there. So the mother mission to Texas, the gateway into Texas during the Spanish period, was San Juan Bautista. And it was what you really have is the Spaniards are building an infrastructure really in or near Texas during this period. So San Juan Bautista is established in around 1699, 1700. As I'll talk about in later podcasts, in about 10 years or so, the Spaniards will make a second attempt to colonize Spanish Texas, which includes in 1718 the founding of San Antonio. And this, after some false starts, this second attempt to settle Texas and to leave a permanent imprint on Texas will be successful.